You may remember that I bought this Mark 1 Vauxhall Astra Saloon back in October, and I did a couple of videos on it then. I thought it was high time to get it out of the barn and give you a 10-month ownership update on this fabulous little classic. So how have our 10 months together been, and what have we got up to? Well, I have to say that this car has really impressed me over the last 10 months. It is incredibly capable. It drives so well. The engine is super sweet. The handling is really rather excellent. The driving position, once you get used to it, works perfectly. And it just plods on. It brings a smile to my face every single time I drive it. It's got guts on the open road. It keeps up with modern traffic. And yet look at it. It looks like nothing else on the road today. My favourite party trick of the Astra remains the saloon boot. I don't know how many people I had commenting on previous videos of this car saying, it's not a saloon, mate, it's a hatchback. Well, they clearly hadn't watched the video, had they? Because this is a saloon. Behold the majesty of the Astra Mark 1 saloon. And the fact that this car is a saloon is probably my favourite feature about it, I have to say. I absolutely love the fact that the base model came in a much less practical format than the rest of the range. I love the fact that the way they have done the saloon is the kind of the cheapest way possible, which is by reusing exactly the same body shell and side panels as the hatch, but by simply sort of welding it shut in slightly different ways so that there's a kind of an opening boot here. The other thing to say as well, though, is it is actually quite capacious. It's quite a large, deep boot, considering that it isn't actually the hatchback. It isn't as impractical as you might think, but obviously you can't carry anything large. There's no way of putting the seats down, so you can't carry a bicycle in it. You can't carry, stuff to the tip if you've got a lot of stuff to take that's long, bits of wood, that kind of thing. And that renders this car incredibly impractical, which just brings me so much joy, because why would you engineer over a long time and money developing a brilliant hatchback for the late 70s, early 80s, and yet also sell it as a very impractical saloon? Of course I know the answer to that. It's because there was a very conservative section of the motoring market who still wanted saloons, and hatchbacks were kind of newfangled and kind of scary because there was a risk that you could see the stuff in your boot that was so valuable. So saloons were very popular in terms of fleet sales in particular. The other thing to note about a Vauxhall Astra saloon is that you must make sure that you are holding the key in your hand before you shut the boot, because if accidentally you've left it in the boot, you are done for, because there is no way of accessing the boot without the key. The other base model aspect of this car that I absolutely love is the engine. The Mark 1 Astra was developed in conjunction with the new Family 1 range of engines, which was fitted to almost all of them. But the base model, this one, gets the 1200 Opel overhead valve engine, which is, I think, from the 50s or 60s. And the fact that if you did choose the base model, you weren't even allowed to have the modern engine that this car was meant to have. I rather adore that fact. However, it's not all bad. It's actually a really good engine. It's really quite quick. It's very refined for an OHV, and it's very economical, and magazine tests at the time compared the performance and economy of both of the cars, the 1.2 and the 1.3, and although on paper there's a big difference in horsepower, in reality, everyday performance, you don't really notice it that much, apparently. Early cars with the new OHC Family 1 engine also suffered with camshaft wear because of incorrect service procedures and that kind of thing. So ultimately, the 1.2 overhead valve engine is a much tougher beast than the 1.3. So have the Astra and I been up to anything interesting in my 10 months of ownership? Well, absolutely yes, we have. First thing is that in the winter, I took it to France for a day trip, and I went with my friend Jim McGill, and we've done a video on our joint channel called Also Driven, and there's a link in the description below if you want to check that out. But we had a brilliant day. The Astra performed faultlessly the entire time, apart from a squeaky heater fan. We drove all the way down from Cambridge to Dover, got on the ferry, potted around northern France, around Calais, bought some wine, had some dinner, and went to the beach and took some photos that would probably not look out of place in some Vauxhall Opel sales material from the early 1980s. And then drove all the way home very late at night, and the Astra was fantastic. It was comfortable, it was reasonably refined, it cruised very happily at about 60 miles an hour. And we absolutely loved it. Jim loved driving it, I loved driving it. It was definitely one of those bonding adventures with a car, even though it was in less than 24 hours. It's also been to a couple of car shows, in particular the Luton Festival of Transport a couple of months ago, which was really terrific, and the attention that this car got was absolutely mind-blowing. So many people came up to talk to me about my car and about memories they had of Astras that they had, and the overriding impression I got from that show is that A, they're very, very rare, Vauxhall Astras, because they just did not last the Mark 1s at all, and two, consequently, they're actually worth quite a bit of money. People were suggesting that this car was worth significantly more than I paid for it. So perhaps it's actually been quite a good investment, although I am absolutely not planning on selling it because I have bonded with this car so much. I really, really like it. The way that it drives just brings me so much joy. It's an old car that is yellow, that looks completely different to everything else. But it's still good to drive. It's enjoyable. It doesn't feel like it's angry. It feels like it's joyful. And I adore that. I also love the 80s-ness of the car and the basicness of it. So we've got the perforated vinyl headlining, we've got the exposed metal, we've got the lack of headrests. Just things you just don't get anymore in cars, which gives this such character. It also differentiates the base model massively from the rest of the range. The rest of the range looks much posher than this inside. You know, you've got mainly full door cards, you've got a much more populated dashboard with clock and radio and a glove box lid, and it just looks like a very, very different, much more upmarket car. I really love that they've engineered the kind of down market version and that somebody sold it. And not only that, they kept it on the road going for 40 odd years, which is fantastic. Well, what of the future with this Astra? Well, I certainly have no plans to sell it, but it does need a little bit of work. So I'm hoping that in the autumn, I will be able to give it a bit of space and time on the driveway where I can do a bit of rust repairs to it, because that is the main thing that needs doing. The rear wheel arches in particular need some attention, and there's quite a big hole in the side of the boot that needs to be repaired. I have done a welding course, so I'm hoping to be able to tackle at least that myself. Has the Astra ever let me down? Well, yeah, it has. There's been a couple of occasions where it's cut out on me and once refused to restart, and the second time it did eventually restart. But I have now traced that problem, I think, to the fuel tank. I have taken the fuel tank off last month, given a really good clean inside, painted it all up outside. Luckily it wasn't rusty inside, but discovered that the fuel pickup pipe kind of leaving the tank had been pinched when somebody had tightened up the fuel clip onto it, or the hose clip onto it. So it was a very, very small, tiny orifice that the fuel would go through. So obviously if there was a tiny speck of dirt or something in the tank, it would block that up very quickly and starve the carburettor of fuel. So I've repaired that, kind of cut off the dodgy bit that was bent. Now it is now free-flowing fuel, so that is brilliant news. So I now trust this car a lot more than I did. The final point I have to say is that quite a few people have said, oh my gosh, when are you doing a video on the Astra next? And well, here's one, I suppose, but I mean, it's a question for you really, you guys. What would you like me to do? Because I've done a review video on it, I've done a collection video on it, I've done a couple of repairing videos on it, and we've done the video going to France on the other channel. So what would you like me to do with this car in a video? Do you want some Astra porn where I do an ASMR kind of, you know, look around the Astra quietly with some gentle music so you can enjoy yourselves whilst watching it? Do you want me to do a comparison with the yellow 1.3 Astra hatch that they have at the Drive Dad's Car place that Classics World have recently done a drive of, and also I Drive a Classic did one too, so I could go and investigate doing that. Could also take it on some adventures, but if you have any suggestions of where, you know, you might be interested in me taking the Astra, then let me know in the comments. I'd be really keen to hear. One little adventure that I am thinking of doing, perhaps later this year, is to take this car back to the Vauxhall dealership that it came from. That would be Western Motorworks in Chislehurst. It's not quite called that now, but I think we will take it there and we'll see if they have any interest in letting me do a little bit of filming outside their dealership. So stay tuned for that one coming up shortly. Well, all that remains for me to say is a gracious thank you for watching this video on my fabulous little Astra. I do hope that you've enjoyed it and that it has satisfied a little bit of your Astra cravings. I will see you again in the next video. Bye.